as I was talking about, finding you on LinkedIn, I think the algorithm is really interested how LinkedIn's feed works. Like the more people or the connections you have, the more, I guess, the same or like the level two connections it shows. And you kept popping up. I forgot who you were commenting on or whose post you were liking, but I just kept remembering the Tiny E product company. And I reached out to you, and it's very. I'm lucky lately. I'm crossing my fingers the past 2 weeks, reaching out to people. It usually takes 2 or 3 times to get somebody on the podcast, and people don't understand when you're running a business, like you want to spend less time on other things. I don't want to be a lead podcast generator. I want to be a
Yes.
designer. So thank you for turning this around really fast. And
Yep.
Eric, I want to talk about you because I saw you have a very interesting degree in psychology and you got into marketing. Then there was a stage where I think you got into the cannabis industry. I
hmm
want to talk about that. How did you get started with marketing and psych?
Yeah. So I actually double majored in psych and English.
Oh,
So that is probably the best version of a package of what I could put together for getting ready for a marketing career. And I didn't start in marketing, I started in sales.
mhm.
And to me, marketing is a form of sales. So that's how I really started is took the my psychology side and understood people. And sales is a lot about relationship building, and marketing is a lot about persuading people to do things. So my psychology side of thing really helps me with that, understanding the psyche of people. And then on the sales side, sales to me is selling a product, marketing is selling a company. So very much still ties together. So my career started in sales and I became very good at it, I think because of my two degrees. And then I was working at LG Electronics and I got promoted from their sales department into marketing at corporate. And that was my first taste of marketing. And I loved it. And part of what I loved about it is I'm a very creative person. I've done some acting, I've done some modeling, I've done some singing, and marketing gives me a chance to use my creative side of my brain as well as my analytical and deep thinking side of my brain and kind of mush them together. So that's how I got into marketing. And how I got into the cannabis side is I really have a passion for cannabis just personally. It's done a lot for my life. I went through a giant weight loss, and a lot of people think that cannabis makes people eat a lot. Cannabis helped me lose about 100 pounds, and it helped stabilize my metabolism and get my body to where my body needed to be after losing a lot of weight. And so, based on my personal passion for cannabis, I was a user and had never vaporized before. And a friend of mine let me borrow their packs. And this was way when packs first came out. And I was like blown away. I'm like, whoa, this like vaporizer thing opens up an entire new door of how we can consume. And I was hooked on the company and I started following them. And at that time, they were really in their infancy and not ready to be hiring marketing people. And it took me 5 years of stalking slash watching what they were doing, waiting for the right opportunity to come up. And in that time, I got a lot of experience working for major corporations. I went from LG to Samsung. I then went into the startup world and worked for startup companies in every different phase that you can imagine, whether it was angel funded, pre IPO, post IPO, already had gone through an acquisition, every different type of stage. And not really knowing that after I left PAX, it got me ready for what I'm doing now, which is running my own company. But after watching PAX for about 5 years, finally some marketing positions started opening up and I applied at the first one. I happened to have already moved into San Francisco, which is where PAX was located at the time, and I got into the marketing department right away. And that was the start of my putting my passion for cannabis with my profession, and being
Mhm.
able to marry the two together has been a dream come true. And I was with PAX for about 9 months or so. And PAX at that time was connected to Juul. Juul is the big nicotine vaporizer company that everybody's talking about in the news right now, with the whole vaporizer kind of stuff that's going on. I left PAX and Juul right at the time where they did what's called a company spin and
Mhm.
spun off the two companies from each other into completely separate entities. So that became then Juul Labs and PAX Labs, and that's when I left the company. And that's when I started my own thing. So that's kind of how I my journey got to where I am now.
You're probably a polymath. I think that's a safe word to say.
Yes.
Creative. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, just like myself. I want to talk about specifically about marketing. I finished General Assembly, which is boot camp of user experience design, and I think there was somebody that mentioned on LinkedIn too. That was like the best sentence ever. Boot camps get you ready for execution, and then when you go to design school, you learn a theory really well. It's been, I think, 4 or 5 years since I've been out of the boot camp, and the last 2 years I've been establishing my principles, design principles, and I know that there's just no way around some things anymore. When I was beginning a rookie or like say junior designer, I was just like, oh, we could do this and we could do that. There's no problem.
Yeah.
How did your shift in marketing change when you transitioned for LG to PAX and specifically for cannabis industry because the marketing and the social media and then all these regulations and all that played a big role. So I wanted to know how did you transition from like the regular open marketing into something that's very regulated?
Absolutely. And actually, there was a step in between there that I took. So I took the first giant step in changing my marketing view and landscape when I went working for major corporations to working for startups.
Hmm.
And instead of being the director of a marketing department where I had, gosh, at Samsung, I had somewhere upwards to a $35 million budget. And I had 10 people that I was managing to be able to put strategies together and implement strategies. I went then in the startup world to being the marketing department with nobody underneath me, with no budget. I had to get the same results, understand who my customer was in the exact same way, but I had maybe $1,000 to spend. And again, nobody to help me. So that was the first shift is it really got me to understand what out of the box thinking really means because I think a lot of people use that term and they think they understand it means oh, just being a little more creative and doing something that maybe nobody else has done before. But to me, especially in the cannabis industry, it has to go way further than that. You have to be thinking about marketing in a different way. And I think that's where my second evolution came is when I got in with PAX, because I wasn't just at the time working on the cannabis side, which has at the time, especially back then, very little regulation. This was at a time where people were afraid to say the word flower in a magazine ad.
Hmm.
Nobody that was making implementations or devices in the cannabis industry was even putting pictures of actual flower, of bud, in their advertisements yet. And so at that time, it was all who's going to be the first? Who's going to be the first? Who's going to get their hand slapped first and see what happens? And then open the door for everybody else. And that's going to be the next step we get to go. On the nicotine side, it was very different. The nicotine side is very much FDA regulated. And to be working on marketing in both of those realms where on the Juul side, I couldn't put a period on the end of a sentence without it going through my compliance and legal division. On
Oh
the
my God.
cannabis side, it was a little more loosey-goosey and we got to be a little bit more creative about what we were saying. And okay, so we can't call it flower, we can't call it weed, we can't call it bud, but what can we call it? We can call it greens, we can make allusions to it about whatever it is and things like that. You cannot do that on the nicotine side when you are that federally regulated.
Hmm.
And that is going to be one of the things that going into the cannabis side, we understand regulation a little bit because we understand what we can and can't do in order not to get ourselves shut off of Facebook or
Hmm.
shut down on Instagram or have our Twitter accounts shut down. So we know how to walk the fine line, but knowing now what we can do to take advantage of that system, and we actually can now on Facebook talk about cannabis companies. You got to be smart about how you do it, and they still aren't as smart as they need to be, so they're still shutting down companies when they shouldn't be, but they're trying to fix that, I hope. But it's the most fun aspect of marketing in cannabis to me right now is that it's up to us to kind of figure out what the rules are, and we're all going through this at the same time. Nobody's had a lead at this. It's everybody's in this kind of on the same timeline together, and I think and we're all learning together and helping each other. And I think that's the other most fun part about this as well.
When did you start working in 2016 to 2017? It says PAX Labs. How would you say the marketing has changed in the cannabis industry since the past 2 years?
It's much more open and free on what you can say, what you can picture. There's advertisements on TV now during Super Bowls. The other thing that's changing is companies are now more mature and
Mhm.
they have more marketing budgets to spend. They have more diligent marketing departments where they might be doing more research on who their audience is. And I know at PAX, our marketing strategies changed over time as we grew because we could do more targeted marketing based on different research studies that we would put together. And now we've got a little bit of money to spend on focus groups, and we found out a little bit of something on this end, and we can start implementing things more turnkey and quickly without having to wait for the next quarter because we have to wait for this and budgets and this and blah 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 blah. It's just now the market and the industry in itself is a lot more robust and more mature, and it's more global as well. I'm looking at possibilities right now, excuse me, that for things with my product, if the United States isn't going to make me as easy to do it, talk about it, and get it out there and sell it, I've got 10 other countries now that I can look to that are either already legalized recreationally or looking to do it within the next 12 to 18 months. So that's the other opportunity is we don't just have to be in this United States of America box anymore. The entire cannabis industry is exploding globally at the same time. So if something doesn't work here, let's go to Europe and try it there because their rules might be different and see what we can do over there. And then how can we start taking those things and bringing those types of lessons back to the States and get ourselves ready for regulation. And when that legalization happens, then we can go to the government and say, look, we've already figured out this and this and this on ways to market ourselves and do it responsibly and not break all these rules and all these different things as well. So it's just been fun to watch it grow and be a part of it.
Which countries do you think we should, at least the people in the United States, which countries they should be modeling and watching who are ahead in the cannabis?
Oh, none? It's not right now a matter of modeling and emulating. I think it's a matter of really watching what everybody's doing and working together and forming a global partnership structure
Mhm.
of some type. But everybody's in their infancy of recreational legality. I mean, even Washington State and Colorado have been legal for 5 years now. They are still learning and still growing and going through issues themselves with things that they've been dealing with for the past 5 years. So I think it's just fun that nobody is light years ahead of anybody else. We are truly and literally going through this together, but one of the things I will say is I think the United States needs to be a little bit more open about our willingness to share and bring in other countries into our world and let them see what we're doing and be a part of what we're doing so we can help them grow as well. We're talking to global companies and people outside of the US. There is this kind of stigma almost that while a lot of other countries want to come to the United States and ask us how to do things, the United States doesn't necessarily want to go out and help a lot of countries do those things. And so I think we need to be a little bit more open about what is working for us, especially on a marketing side. Like, how are we really able to reach our customers without talking specifically about cannabis in a way where we might get accused of doing what Juul is getting accused of and targeting teens, for example.
Yeah.
So we need to be very cognizant of those kind of things and help each other while we're learning and growing.
Yeah, it's kind of true. I've seen one of the Colorado companies. I think they're specifically working on the hemp brick, and I believe they already built Colorado Harvest Company. Maybe I believe they built already like 5 to 10 houses in Jamaica, and
Correct.
now they're actually pushing from the locals to push out. I think compliances and just like I guess we call I don't want to call FDA, but whatever Jamaica's government has to establish the laws of how the buildings would get constructed and all that stuff. And uh, I wanted to ask you if there's a company like yours, and I spoke to a few people that are getting into the textile business like yourself. How do you start a small company? And you said you're already on Series A funding.
Mhm.
Um, and going specifically, how did you know who are the targeted users are, the target personas? Because you kind of pivoted or positioned yourself a little bit differently. You're targeting the cannabis industry of general public. Oh, let's just give paper to everybody, and you're going that route. How did you get started? And then just specifically talk about figuring out, I guess, the audience and positioning yourself.
Yeah, I think there are two. keys if you're looking for a magic formula or of how to start a successful business. Number one is solve a problem. And the first problem that I was trying to look at is, why isn't hemp paper being sold everywhere? And because it's been being made for like 3,000 years, right? And why
Yeah.
is it always a blend? It's not 100% paper. So that was number one, as I found out, I think I figured out why, and I solved that problem. And then second, you have to have a really good plan. So fortunately, I was able to get both of those together. And what I found out about hemp paper specifically is regular people outside of the cannabis industry still don't know that cannabis and hemp are two different plants, and that you can't roll up a piece of hemp paper and smoke it and get stoned. And so right now, for any big paper company to really get that switch on a regular consumer basis, it's going to take millions of dollars on a marketing level to educate consumers. And that's before they even make a purchase consideration. I don't have that time, and I don't have millions of dollars to spend to educate an entire consumer base before they even decide they want to consider purchasing the product that I'm selling. So that's where I turned to the cannabis industry, because there's a couple reasons. First of all, hemp and cannabis plant-wise are cousin plants. So there is a natural compatibility with the premise of what I'm doing. But second of all, in the cannabis industry, we're selling a medicine. For a lot of people, we're selling something that is healing. We're selling something that is very green, and we can use the entire cannabis plant and the entire hemp plant, but we are selling it in the most irresponsible way possible. The amount of garbage that is tree waste paper that we are using, and I understand a lot of it is due to things like regulations because of child-proof packaging and things like that. But we are being very irresponsible about it. So that's kind of what the ding dong moment for me was if I can get the entire cannabis industry to stop using trees for all of their business to business paper. I'm not talking about consumer grade paper, no rolling papers, no wrapping paper, none of that kind of stuff. I'm talking about packaging and labeling, receipt roll paper. I'm even going to be making toilet paper for the bathroom in a dispensary. If we can get the entire industry, which is known as this illegitimate industry, to do something so socially and environmentally responsible as to make a switch from one really valuable resource that we're running out of, which is trees, and switch over to something that we have plenty of, would legitimize us right away. And it would vitalize an entire market. If we can get everybody to switch over to hemp paper, we have a self-sustaining business model for the entire hemp industry that will always be requiring my hemp stock. And the other part of what I'm doing is I'm not just using hemp stock to make my paper. I found out a way to mitigate another problem, which is the CBD industry right now is creating tons and tons of both pre and post extraction waste, because the CBD industry happens to be the largest and fastest growing segment of the cannabis industry. So all of that waste is being built up in these CBD extraction warehouses. And these companies are having to make a couple different decisions. They either have to get rid of it somehow, which means they have to pay somebody to get it off of their land, and then they have to burn it. They have to throw it away. They have to do something with it. Or they have to store it in a way that doesn't let it mold, which then turns into an environmental hazard, and figure out something to do with it or wait for somebody to tell them something to do with it. And so that's kind of what I figured out. I can make half of my paper from both the pre and post extraction waste from CBD extractors. And then when I turn around and make paper for those companies, for example, make the packaging for one of those extraction companies, that is then that repeatable, sustainable business model. And the greatest thing is that the more and more that these extraction companies are hearing about what I'm doing, they're willing to give me all of this product for free. And so what that help does is that help mitigates an entire cog on my end, where if I can take out half of my raw material cost, except for just going and picking it up, I have to get it from them somehow, then that's going to do me a favor helping to drive down the cost so that my consumers, which happens to be the cannabis industry, can actually afford to make that change a lot quicker and a lot faster. So it's all kind of self-serving, and that's, in a giant nutshell, why I chose to focus on the cannabis industry, is because there's just so many different facets to it that makes so much sense. And then I can use the cannabis industry to start educating the outside market, and then I can start sprinkling in some consumer products like paper drinking straws that are water resistant because hemp is naturally water resistant, and little not only the straws for Starbucks, but how about sleeves for Starbucks? I'm going to be making 100% hemp corrugated boxes. That's an easy switch over. So that's how we can start then getting consumer product out there where they're automatically using it in their day-to-day lives. And they may happen to ask that Starbucks barista, why does this look a little different? And that's when they say, oh, because it's hemp. And then they've just had an education moment that I didn't have to pay for on a marketing level. So that kind of ties all back to marketing. And then why I'm focusing on cannabis is because I think it's the best way to break that barrier into the consumer market without me having to spend all that money on the marketing that's going to have to drive that.
That's crazy because I'm actually kind of ignorant too. I see a lot of I'm a lot on Instagram almost every single day, so I notice a lot of brands they're still using the educational posts, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my god, I'm so sick of these already. Like, doesn't everybody know? But then when you mentioned in the beginning that a lot of people don't distinguish what cannabis and CBD or hemp is, and that just like nailed it in me. I'm like, wow, I'm kind of ignorant in that.
It's true. And if you just go, and I am a talker, I'm a type A personality. I love to talk to everybody and anybody. And I love it when people ask me what I do because I say I work in the cannabis industry. I don't tell them what I do right away, and that automatically starts the conversation. But just go out and talk to 10 people that are not related to the cannabis industry and just ask them, do you know the difference between the cannabis plant and the hemp plant? And I was astounded. I was ignorant to it as well. And it wasn't until I just was out there talking to people that I was like, wow, that's why nobody's buying hemp paper. They think you can smoke it. And it's
Let's
also not 100% out there. The hemp paper you can buy right now is only a 20%, 25% blend on average. So it's actually not really solving our problem because it's still using 75% of trees.
Why do you think that is? What is it? Is it something specific legality issues or?
No, it's because hemp is the strongest natural fiber on earth. And the hemp stalk is a lot like bamboo and how it grows. It grows between like 12 and 20 feet tall in these giant stalks. And then the flower and bud part is at the top where all the sun is, and the stalk part is where all the shade is. I use the fibers from the stalks, and a lot of those fibers may be 15 feet long. And since hemp is so tough, it's really difficult to work with. I have to find a machine that's large enough to break down that fiber so that
Yeah.
it's small enough that I can make paper with it. Well, hemp's been illegal for a long time. So there's not a lot of companies out there where I can find that type of machinery for the bulk that I need because I'm doing this in large commercial scale rolls. So all of that is why nobody's put the time, the effort, the research and development into it. The other thing is consumers don't care. They don't care it's only 25% hemp right now because they don't really care that it's hemp because they're not buying it. So nobody's forced the issue until now. And that's where I'm coming in.
Can we talk a little bit about machinery? How did you come across machinery? Do you have anything in prototype already, or did you find? Because I remember I read an article that I believe Levi is rolling out with, I'm pretty sure, like a 50-50 blends pretty soon of their like jeans and their. I think they made a pledge by I want to say 2004 or the future that they're going to be 100% hemp.
Yep.
And one of the people on LinkedIn, I forgot which groups. I think we both have this guy Adam. I forgot his name. Anyways, he mentioned that right now Levi is like leading with breaking down the fiber into like clothing material.
Mhm.
Is there anything right now going on in the machinery world where companies are building? Is there any startups or anything like that since you're dealing with that?
Yeah, it's exploding right now. It is exploding. So it's exploding for a lot of different reasons. And it is specifically because of the farm bill that just passed and decoupling hemp from marijuana or from cannabis. That's one of the other things in marketing. I'm trying to get away from calling it marijuana and calling
Yeah.
it cannabis. So I sometimes still fall into that line. So I correct myself. But um, what's happening now is the United States is getting a chance on the hemp side to catch up to where everybody else in the world has been. Hemp, the number one, two, and three countries are France, the Netherlands, and Russia, unfortunately, for hemp growing. And so they have been dealing with hemp fibers, hemp paper, hemp, a lot of different things for a long time. And so a lot of that machinery already exists over in Europe, and they're just now starting to bring it over here. There have been a couple companies, and these are the companies that I have been working with, that have been dealing with hemp, whether it's been making pulp or producing paper in some sort of fashion on the commercial scalable basis like I'm doing, and they've been doing it for European companies. So, for example, the pulper that I found, the only reason why he knows how to deal with pulp or deal with the hemp stock and he has the machinery to do it is because he's already a pulper, but he's been doing pulp breakdown and pulping for this hemp company in France for a while. And so it's literally the first probably 9 months of the 18 months that I've been in business was research and development and trying to find people. And I'm already on a scalable level. I have not been hand making any of my end use product. I have 2 full production rolls that are ready right now to be broken down into business cards to go sell. And that was done on a big, huge commercial press. There's not a lot of presses out there who want to take the risk of getting the waste from hemp into their machines and having some of that accidentally get into some of their other paper. So right now the challenge has been a lot of those machines may exist out there in the marketplace, but because nobody has used them for hemp yet, it's been a challenge to get them to even consider it because they don't know what it's going to do to the machines because they're not educated in hemp enough. And they don't want to take the time out of their whatever they're doing to learn about it enough. So that's been a lot of the challenge with the machines. They're 2 things. They either don't exist and they're just now starting to come into the marketplace. And if you look through cannabis magazines, I get quite a few of them. You're seeing now more of the machine companies doing more advertising for decorticators and things like that are hemp specific. Or the machines exist out there, but they've never been used for hemp. And so we're just now seeing that turn of them being willing to take 25% of their time to do a little research and development on the hemp side and see what it will do and how different it is to clean the machines and kind of some of the byproduct it leaves behind and things like that. So it's changing a lot with the machines out there. It's exciting for me because that's why it's taken me a long time to get to this point is because of the hindrance of what has been available. Because for the first year, hemp's been illegal. So it's just now the floodgates have opened. And I think because cannabis is still federally not legal and hemp is, I think a lot of people are now, if they're having to make the decision between getting into hemp cultivation or cannabis cultivation, I think they're now starting to make more of the hemp call because it's now federally legalized and it's way more available. So yeah, it's just exciting because now I've got more available.
Yeah, it's really true about the hemp business growing. I think I saw LinkedIn stat too, it was like 16,000 farms or hemp farms. And I think one of the guys said, don't really take that number seriously because some of the registered farms are like a quarter of acre. So that's like more like an R&D space. Yeah, just a quarter of acre of a farm. I want to talk about specifically about your business, like getting. I talked to somebody before. They're in the textile industry and they're making clothes. They're working their way up to Series A, and like what goes into all that beforehand. What team do you need to establish, and all the little nuances that go in?
Yeah, so up until I started my Series A, I have been self-funding everything in my company. So it was all my money. And so I feel very fortunate in that I'm just now starting to fundraise and I'm in pre-revenue status already to this point. So first off, I feel very fortunate with that. I would not have been able to get there if I didn't have people helping me. And while I have done the great bulk of this alone, I have been able to sprinkle in different advisors and different friends and family members that I've been able to ask for advice and feedback and different organizations. Like there's a woman cannabis and entrepreneurs closed Facebook group that I've been involved in. And that's been a great resource to be able to ask for some feedback and advice. But as far as tools and things you need, the number one thing is when you're starting to fundraise, you've got to, and I kind of equate this to building a house. You can't build a house unless you have the right pieces, and then you can't put those pieces together properly unless you have the right tools. So you've got to have the right pieces and the right tools, and the right pieces would be you have to have a good pitch deck. And to have that, you've got to have all the tools inside of there, which is what are you doing? Why are you asking for money? Where have you come so far? Who are your competitors? What are your challenges? You've got to try to think about all of the different things that anybody who's truly interested in investing in your company would want to be interested in, but you can't give them everything away so that you're pooping all over them, because you don't want to have a 50,000 page pitch deck. You've got to keep it short enough that they want more, and that they want to come back and also read it all, but you don't want to give them everything that they become bored halfway through. The second thing you've got to do is you have to know your numbers. I will admit I didn't know much about pitching when I started my company, and I watched a heck of a lot of Shark Tank. It sounds really trivial to say that, but if you have no clue how to pitch and no clue what anybody who wants to listen to it is going to want to know, it is a really great way just to sit there and watch, because that is a lot of what happens when you're in front of people. And I've been in front of Kevin O'Leary, not pitching, but I have twice now been in front of him where he's been speaking to groups, talking about what he expects from people. And he gives the exact same advice that he gives anybody that he gives on the show. And it's true. Knowing your numbers is number one. If you don't know where you're at, what you need, where you're going, who your comp is, what share of the market that you think you can get, and anything in between, it just doesn't give you any credibility. And so you've got to be able to tell that story in a really credible way so that people will believe you and want to jump on your train. Because that's ultimately what we're asking people to do, is believe me, believe the passion that I have, and jump on the train with me. Not only jump on the train, but I'm going to ask you to give me a lot of money to do that. So it's kind of a big deal. But if you've got all of your tools together and you can get your pitch down and really understand how to talk about your business without the ums and the ahs and the, oh gosh, I didn't quite think of that, and trying to really think about every question that could come at you and be ready for it, it's really going to give you that instant credibility, and people will automatically want to keep listening to you. So you just got to make sure you have your poop together, for lack of a better term. I'm thinking back a lot.
It's okay. After the first funding, where do you see Tiny Paper go, and what's if you could briefly talk about what's your 5-year goal at least, or the future goals, and different stages too to hit, because I know like the success metrics matter a lot, and when you start off a business.
Yeah,
and keeping the right success metrics too.
Yeah. And the first thing that I had to learn is I don't know everything. I don't know what I don't know, and I know that I am learning as I go. So that was the first thing. If you can get over that and get over yourself right at the very beginning, that is going to put you light years ahead of where a lot of other would-be entrepreneurs may be. Because a lot of people go into business thinking that they already know everything, and they're not willing to let people come into their world and possibly give them some feedback on something that could really help them, because they take it personal, and you just kind of got to get over that. So that's the first thing. And now I just want to, what was the start?
Like follow up, basically your strategy for the next 5 years, and where do you see Tiny Eat Company, or like different stages too?
So now that I'm pre-revenue, I started this with a 3 to 5 year acquisition strategy already at the very beginning. And that was just coming from an understanding of knowing what I was doing, what the market potential was, and where I thought that the desire would be. And so far right now, I am 18 months into that, and I feel really good about that. There's different stages in when you're in startup realm, and I feel like I'm pretty good because I'm right now in revenue generation status, and that's pretty important when you're looking for investment funding, because that's kind of your proof of concept to anybody that wants to get involved in it. If you can't prove that somebody is interested enough to buy your product, that they're actually willing to put money down, then you're going to have a problem in convincing anybody that they want to give you their money to keep your company going. So what I've done is built in strategies to try to get around that. Instead of having revenue right now where I can go to investors and say, I can prove my concept because somebody's already purchased it, I have companies that have signed LOIs, letters of intent. And these are contracts that I have with companies that say, I don't have this product made right now, but when I have somebody that gives me the money for it and I make that product, they've already committed to me that they will buy it. And so that is a strategy going into fundraising pre-revenue where I can't quite prove what I'm doing, but I can prove it enough that somebody signed a contract that if they breach it and I make that product, then they've got a legal struggle, and that's pretty firm ground to stand on. So a lot of it is getting strategic about what you're offering and how you can position your company no matter what stage you're in. The other thing is being able to be negotiable about your offer. Understanding what your buy-in is and why that's your buy-in, and then understanding the differences of what you can offer, like safes and convertible notes, and you want to take on a debt note, and what the differences between all those three things are, and even setting yourself up right. I did not set myself up as an LLC. I set myself up as an S Corp right off the bat because I knew that once I got to the investment stage, most investors, especially at the capital stage, are going to ask LLCs to make that switch anyway. So that was a preemptive strategy that I built in where I can go to an investor and say, I don't even have to make that switch from an LLC later. I already started myself as a corporation, so we can go ahead and bypass that and keep moving on. So there's a lot of those things that I thought of right off the bat and I set myself up for right at the beginning that are really helping me now that I'm in that investment seeking stage. And having those LOIs, especially any type of agreement that you can get from anybody, even if it's just a promissory note or something like that, in lieu of revenue is a huge thing that you can use to help you kind of prove your concept, because that's ultimately what you're trying to do to anybody that you're trying to get money from.
Mm-hmm. And theoretically, after you get all the funding and everything, where are you heading after?
So right now, what my money is going to get me is fulfilling LOIs and doing further R&D. And so from that, then it's going to be, once I start getting revenue generated, I'm going to be able to, all that money is going to go right back into the company. I'm not like building a personal piggy bank.
Can I interrupt you for a second? How do you establish where you go to test for R&D and how much you're going to put that away?
That came with me and hang on, my dog's growling at something.
I put my puppies away right now too.
So that came with working with my product developer. And my product developer is a third-party partner that I have had who was the first company to make 100% hemp wraps, rolling wraps, like blunt papers and things. And so I found him just by connections and connections. He was the first person to do 100% hemp this, and that's where I started talking to him. He had a lot of the cost knowledge because of the partners he had worked out with. And so based on what he knew about his R&D process, I was able to use his cost analysis and structure that so it was very similar to mine to give a really good snapshot of what it should cost me for R&D for like each production roll, for example. So now I know it's going to cost me X dollars on average for each production roll that I have to make right now. And I can produce this many business cards from the roll, and I can produce this many boxes that are this size. And that's how I put my pro forma together. That's one of those other tools that you're going to need. So now I also, to give any investor a snapshot view of what I think revenue looks like for the next 4 years, I've built a 4-year pro forma. That is by quarter, it's by product. It shows all of the margin as far as my pricing. I have reasons for why I structured that based on growth and things like that. So I can show that my plan is to get within 4 years on my pro forma, get to a certain revenue point. And I also show where I'm putting that revenue back into the company for different R&D. And then that kind of leads to my valuation. And that's what you want to get in order to get to that acquisition, is you want to get to a valuation point. And so that's what I'm trying to do right now. The next 3 to whatever years is doing everything I can to build valuation. And that means building revenue, building IP. If I can get patents, all of that helps add to valuation. Any other partners I can bring on that may be able to add value. That's what I'm driving to right now, is to get to the largest valuation I can get so I can get to that, whatever event is, whether it's an acquisition or a buyout. And that's also one of the decisions you need to make when you're starting a company. Are you trying to build a legacy? Do you want to build a company that you want to pass on to your kids and have them pass on to their kids and the name lasts and it becomes this big dynasty of whatever? Or do you want an acquisition plan and a strategy to exit? And that's the decision I had, is I don't care about if my kids do with this company. I want to get out and I want to build my portfolio and then start investing in all these other companies. And that's always been my strategy from the beginning.
That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about partnerships? Because I know that a lot of people starting out businesses right now, the only thing that they could offer is like revenue models when it comes to partnerships, what
Mhm.
to look out for, any tips and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's actually very ironic you're asking me this because I now about 6 months ago signed on my first equity sharing partner. And that's another one of the ways that you can be a little bit, especially in this industry and as an entrepreneur, you can be really, really creative about how you bring on partners. I don't have a lot of money. This person is a kind of celebrity speaker in the cannabis realm, and they usually have speaking fees in order to go and represent your company or whatever your organization is. I built part of that into my equity structure. So instead of paying a bunch of money for this person to go out and talk about my company, which I couldn't afford, I gave them some equity in my company that I thought and we thought together made sense for the value that they brought in. And so that's where I was able to kind of, it's like a prepayment or a down
Hmm.
payment, if you will, because I don't have a bunch of cash that I can give away for anything other than research and development and put back in my company right now. And so I made the decision at that time to bring on my first equity sharing partner. He did not. This person did not have majority equity by any means, just a
Hmm.
small share, and unfortunately, that didn't work. I am now in a legal battle with this person. They are no longer my partner. I don't know that I will bring on another equity sharing partner at the level that he was at, just because of the challenges that I have had. And it's it's just really interesting you asked that because my view on partnerships now is very different than it was 90 days ago. Just because everything literally fell apart. And if you were to ask me right now what happened, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you, just things fell apart. And that sounds horrible to say, but I'm only 50% of any real partnership that comes in. And it's just like any relationship. That's the thing you always have to keep in mind with partnerships. That's why I'm in a legal fight right now. It's like a marriage. It's like a civil union. It's like a anything where you have two people where you live together for 20 years. When you have to separate that out, it's like separating any other big relationship where you have things intertwined like that. And it's been a battle and it's another something that I am dealing with on the side of getting out there and running my business is I'm now dissolving a partnership and going through that as well at the same time. So, as far as partnerships, I'm not against them, but I would say do your due diligence more than you think you have to do your due diligence because I would say that might be the one area where I lacked and got myself into this situation. So you just have to make sure you get in with the right partners and make sure you're offering the right thing for your company. Because nobody is looking out for your company except you, no matter what they say, no matter how good of partner they are, no matter if they're your mother that becomes your partner. Nobody cares about your business as much as you. My advice, I was never comfortable giving more than 50% of my business away, more than 49%. I never wanted to do anything that was going to give the majority of voting share and the majority of stake in my company away. And so those were some of the things that I always kept in mind, even when I was looking for that partnership.
Do you see like I wanted to ask you too, since you have so much knowledge in the field, what businesses should be asking today in cannabis or hemp? The questions, specific questions that you don't see maybe kind of get overlooked too from your perspective.
Um, I think the biggest question that I think gets overlooked is what else can we do with hemp other than focus on the flower? Yay! And on the cannabis side, what else can we do other than grow cannabis? I don't hear a lot of people asking about and talking about all of those other ancillary services and products that the industry needs. And especially, that's the one thing that I love when somebody asks what I do, and I tell them only I work in the cannabis industry. I 99, I would say 99% of the time, the very next statement is, "Oh, where do you sell your weed out of? Where's your shop?" And that is the most annoying question to me because I have to tell them I don't actually touch the plant even. I make an ancillary product for cannabis business owners. And then they're like, what's an ancillary product? And there starts a whole nother education process. So right now, I don't hear enough questions being asked about anything other than cultivation and CBD.
Oh my
And
God.
there are so many other areas that are starving for innovation and starving for things like you're already talking about hempcrete and hemp blocks. I mean, hempcrete is amazing. It's amazing to me that we're not focusing on this more as a building material. One of the things a lot of people probably don't know, hempcrete gets stronger the longer it sits there. So why aren't we building our bridges out of this stuff is what I would like to know. So let's give a whole new term to Infrastructure Week and start educating people and on really what this plant is really capable of. It's not just on the medicine side and it's not just on the cultivation side.
Yeah, I was really interested in looking into the textile industry. One of the previous podcasts guests that I had, Skylar, said it's gonna be a $44 trillion industry, and he said the CBD market is kind of gonna flatline in a few years, or might just peak, and everything's gonna switch over. Even the first podcast that I had, I didn't even know in my own country, in my motherland. I was born in Lithuania. There's a huge processing facility over there that processes all the hemp I didn't even know, and they have like European Union established like safety codes
Yeah.
and all that stuff that goes into their catalogs. I wanted to ask you, it's again a little bit more specific question. I know coming from like e-commerce side, a lot of people focus specifically on acquiring new customers, but they don't focus enough on retention. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there are two terms that I, as a marketing person, always wanted to make sure I knew. And I get shocked when I talk to marketers in this industry that don't know. What is your customer acquisition cost? And what is your customer's lifetime value? And if you don't know those two things, if you don't know what it costs you to go out and get each customer and how long they're going to retain their services with you, then how do you justify your spend? How do you know what your ROI is? And if you don't know what your ROI is, then how are we putting P&Ls together? So I guess that's kind of where I take things is understanding it is going to cost me a lot less. And this is my strategy right now. My goal is to keep my customer acquisition cost at zero. Because if I can do that, I can drive more revenue for my company and not spend anything. So my entire marketing strategy is on doing things that are going to get me noticed for free and not cost me anything. One of that is all of these trade shows I go to. Every single one, I collect business cards. It is the one industry on earth right now where if you don't have a business card, you are not seen as legitimate. Right now, every other industry out there is getting away from business cards, but it's again, and I've even been told before I had business cards, I don't believe you're a real company. You don't have a business card. So I get business cards of everybody, and I have a database of every single business card and what that person does in my computer. And so when I'm ready to start generating revenue, I already have a list of 350 people right now that have said, yes, I'm ready to buy business cards when you're ready. I have another list of PR people that, yes, when you're ready, I am ready to talk about you. I have another list of all these CBD extractors. When you're ready for a product, I am ready to give you free raw material. So I have built a database of all of these different buckets of strategy people and strategy things where I can get noticed, I can get sold, I can get referrals, and do all this without it costing me anything. And so that's really been my main driver of everything I have been doing in my marketing strategy is how can I do this and have it not cost me anything? And the biggest thing is to retain customers is start asking for things like referrals. How about giving a discount when you buy 5 packages of business cards or something like that? Start building these lifetime value strategies in so it forces people to have to buy a certain amount of your product to get to a different level. And then you start creating customer loyalty. And that's really what the name of the game is. And so building customer loyalty, and then how can I get that customer to talk about what I'm doing to their people? Maybe I'll give them discounts if they can tell 5 of their friends and they bring 5 of their friends over. I'll give them a free pack of something or a free blah, 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 blah. Every time that they do that, they're making another commitment to your company. And this is part of my psychology training. It only takes 21 days to form a habit. If I can get for 21 times for somebody to be referring me somehow, somewhere out there, whether it's giving me a like on my Facebook thing or whatever, 21 times, if I can get them talking about me or thinking about me, that's going to help me be retained in their memory more too. So it's just kind of going back to how often can I get in front of them? And that's how often I think I can start retaining them a little bit more. And then my other part of my strategy is I've got all these social media handles where I'm going to be creating content. And I'm going to make people constantly be interested in what I'm doing because I'm going to be talking about my partners, talking about my customers. Why do my customers want to work with me? Because I bring value proposition to everybody that works with me because they just made a socially and environmentally responsible decision. So that's how I'm going to retain them. If you work with me, I'm going to shout your name all over my website as a partner. I'm going to give you a word shout out on my Instagram, and I'm going to give you some free advertising. And that's going to be our symbiotic relationship. So it's building some of those strategies into what I'm already doing with some of my customers and having my customers also help me retain themselves by helping me retain other customers by their means. So yeah. And then how can I also do something symbiotic for them anywhere else? How can I help drive their business in any way and start building these partnerships and things like that?
Cool. Well, almost nearing an hour. I'm going to go into like more general questions. How does somebody in the cannabis industry and the hemp industry this year finish off the last quarter very strong? And how should they prepare for 2020?
Yeah. First off, how to prepare is just know that nothing's slowing down. You got to be ready and be ready to scale. And number one thing that I think we have to remember in the cannabis industry specifically, customer service is not dead. If we can be a customer-centric industry so that everybody always wants to do business with us, no matter who we are or what we're doing, that is what's going to drive revenue everywhere. If everybody that talks to me as a business owner loves talking to me, whether they're buying something from me or not, whether they're a customer end user or whether they're a vendor or whether they're a competitor and I just happen to like them because they're a competitor and I'm nice to them, all of that together is what's going to help to be driving revenue for this industry. It's not just about what we're selling, it's about how we're selling it. And I think that's what's really going to help companies be as successful as they can be. How we can drive down the rest of the year and be as successful is just keep going. Why would anybody slow down at this point? Like, there is so much exciting stuff. What I would say is get more involved in the industry. We're not just running businesses. We are part of a community. And what I would say is start getting involved with things. Start talking to people. Get involved in associations. Start getting yourself involved and apply to be speakers at some of these shows that are coming up. Just get out there a little bit more. And I think that's also free advertising and free marketing you can do for yourself is just become involved in the community. Let people know who you are, not because you're poking an ad at them, but because you're sitting with them at an event and you just happen to start talking to them. And now you've got a new buddy, and oh, by the way, they also want to be a customer. So it's let's just do what we've been doing. We like to get together and smoke joints together, right? So let's get together and do that and also talk about our companies and just be a community and be customer centric. And that's how we're all going to be successful.
Before we go, last words, where can they find you personally in your tiny e-company? And where can they reach out to you if they have any questions?
Perfect. So I've got two websites. One is my up and coming, it says coming soon, but it's a website where you can put contact information in, and that is at tinyepaper.com. I also have a hemp pledge, environmental activism site that I have up. And it's where people can actually make a hemp pledge that they will do whatever they can do to further this hemp mission. And I'm going to be rolling out that in some stages as I get kind of out of semi-stealth mode when I get my investment round closed. And that is at hemppledge.com. And then there's a little button where you can take the pledge and it tells you what the pledge means and what it is. I'm going to create like a 30-day action plan. Again, 20 days to form a habit. If I can put a 30-day action plan just to start getting people to educate other people about hemp specifically, like maybe one of those action plans is next Tuesday, go and tell one of your friends outside of the cannabis industry that hemp and cannabis are not the same plant. And that's your job for the day. And so doing things like that. So the hemppledge.com. And then I have Not a lot of activity on my social media stuff yet because I'm going to be doing that when I can start building revenue, and that's when I'll splash. But I've got the Hemp Pledge and Tiny E Instagram. I've got a Twitter, and I've got Facebook for both of them as well. I will start doing some announcements on those and becoming a lot more active as I start getting there. But other than that, watching the websites and sending me information, and I'll be sending out info as I start getting to the next stages. I want
Awesome.
everyone doing.
Any last words for the cannabis community? Or go ahead.
I'll just give my personal LinkedIn, Erica Halverson, on LinkedIn, and it's under Tiny E Paper, and I'm free to have anybody connect with me and shoot me out a DM.
Cool. Awesome. And before we run out, words for the cannabis industry, last meaningful words, tips, anything you want to say.
Let's just keep going and be strong, and just remember what it is that we are in this for. Everybody in this industry has a passion about it in some sort of way. Never lose your passion.
That's how we're going to end up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Holy crap, that was awesome.